April 1933. A police flashbulb lights the corpse, lying in a shallow grave southwest of Berlin. It's a male, shot once at close range. The victim is Eric Hanussen, who has been missing for a week. A prominent clairvoyant and occultist, he'd been born to a Jewish family in Vienna before obscuring those origins to cozy up with the rising National Socialists. A close associate with the SA stormtroopers, his predictions had increasingly consisted of anti-Semitic pronouncements and visions of a coming Third Reich. His murder, officially unsolved, may have even been due to his greatest public prediction, that the Nazis would come to power after a fire at the Reichstag. A plan possibly divulged to him in advance by his brown shirt friends, and one they did not want public, giving all the more reason for a team of stormtroopers to, for example, gun the kidnapped psychic down in a lonely field. His death is estimated to have happened on March 25th, just after the Enabling Act granted Chancellor Hitler the power to rule free of constitutional constraints. The first victim in Hitler's war with occultism. Thanks so much to Saley for helping to keep us extra historians connected across the globe. Last episode, we explored the strange contradiction inherent in Nazi ideology. While it drew on symbols imported from Eastern religions, superstitious folklore, and even pagan and pre-Christian traditions, the movement also wanted to be perceived as rationalist and modernist. The irony there, of course, being that they also rejected science in favor of so-called border sciences that had not been proven, but Nazis believed would prove true with further research. Now, that doesn't mean that the Nazis tolerated occult practitioners. Remember, good National Socialists were supposed to reject superstition. Yet, for its first 4 years in power, Hitler's regime was surprisingly hands-off about the large number of self-proclaimed clairvoyants, graphologers, mediums, psychics, and astrologers who'd become so pervasive in the miasma of anxiety that pervaded Weimar Germany. Because the fact was, a lot of these folks saw the meteoric rise of the Nazi Party, especially after Hitler's imprisonment after the beer hall putsch made him a national celebrity, and started tailoring their predictions to forecast the movement's rise. Therefore, a lot of opportunistic occultists, as well as theosophists, Ariosophists, and those interested in resurrecting Germanic religion, were absorbed into the Nazi orbit. In fact, there were those who felt that Hitler was being too lenient on occultists, and began a personal crusade of debunking those they saw as superstitious frauds. Chief among them was Mathilde Ludendorff, second wife of the World War I general Eric Ludendorff, who'd thrown his weight behind Hitler's beer hall putsch, then retired from public life after an unsuccessful run for president in 1925. A psychologist, Dr. Ludendorff became an opponent of occultism after treating several patients she believed had been negatively impacted by supernatural dogma. She and her circle published articles and books attacking occult practitioners, exposing frauds, and criticizing what she saw as faulty pseudo-history. Things like linking German Aryans with the Indo-Aryans of India, belittling those who used the swastika and tried to connect Siegfried with Buddha and Krishna. She also published exposés on how mediums faked spirit activity in seances and the psychological techniques clairvoyants employed to make it seem like they were reading clients. In fact, Eric Hanussen from the beginning of this episode was one of her favorite targets, at least until he turned up in a shallow grave. And if at this point you're thinking, oh man, finally a decent skeptic here, someone who's sensible and has her head on straight, well, not so fast there. See, one reason Dr. Ludendorff hated occultists so much was that she was a major promoter of the stab-in-the-back myth, an idea popularized by her husband that Germany only lost World War I because they were sabotaged on the home front by Jews, communists, pacifists, and, she argued, occultists. Yeah, see, Dr. Ludendorff was seriously anti-religion. And I mean like really, really anti-religion. For instance, she considered Christianity to be a fraud. She once called Jesus a Jewish trickster who never died on the cross, and said that the religion should be abandoned. In fact, she created her own polytheistic spiritual group known as the Society for Knowledge of a German God, attempting to resurrect German paganism. And in case you couldn't guess by now, her writings were also rabidly anti-Semitic. Then in the 1930s, she and her husband authored a series of increasingly unhinged books and pamphlets, insisting that occultists were secretly allied with Jesuits, Freemasons, Chinese magicians, Jews, the British royal family, African mystics, and socialists in a vast conspiracy to bring the German race down, all organized by their dark puppet master, a man controlling it all from his remote mountaintop palace. The Dalai Lama. Yeah, real tinfoil hat stuff. In fact, the Ludendorff's pamphlets were so insane that by the early 1930s, the Nazis, trying to appear more moderate after winning seats in the legislature, were distancing themselves from the couple. Do you know how batshit you have to sound for the Nazis to distance themselves from you? However, the Third Reich's policy towards occultists began to shift in 1937, when the Gestapo received an unsolicited report by a debunker requesting that they take a more vigorous role in suppressing so-called unscientific occultism, while still allowing qualified figures to work on astrology, border sciences, and associated research. The assault was multi-pronged, with the Gestapo surveilling occultist societies for any sign of communism, individualism, or forming international connections. Likewise, any leadership figure that appeared to have a charismatic sway over followers were intimidated into silence as a way to cut off rival leaders. Especially targeted were those whose predictions contradicted party dogma. This was accompanied by a public information campaign of lectures and articles condemning superstition and charlatanry, while claiming that occult practices were a secret attack on Germany by Jews and Freemasons. New laws criminalized commercial astrology and palm reading, and once the war began, astrological calendars were also banned, due to the possibility of their use by the enemy in undermining morale. Meanwhile, a group of government-associated debunkers performed shows revealing the secrets behind everything from knocking at seances to card tricks. And what followed was, well, something kind of right out of Arrested Development. The Reich's Artists Union filed a protest with the government, complaining that their debunkers were robbing stage magicians of their livelihoods by revealing the secrets behind magic tricks. Their art, they argued, was purely for entertainment and should not be punished along with psychics and mediums. This feud between the magicians and debunkers stretched for 2 years into 1941, and the magicians eventually triumphed when Hitler personally exempted them. After all, they were showing their patriotism by entertaining troops while giving onstage disclaimers that nothing they did was supernatural. Then on May 10th, 1941, repressing occultism became a major priority. Because on that day, Deputy Führer Rudolf Hess climbed into an aircraft in southern Germany and flew alone to the UK. After crashing in a field in Scotland, he was quickly apprehended and turned over to British interrogators. Hess told them that he'd come to negotiate peace between Germany and the British Empire. See, with the coming invasion of the Soviet Union, Hess feared a two-front war and decided he'd stop it by unilaterally negotiating peace. In doing so, he hoped to make Hitler proud. Spoiler alert, Hitler was not proud. In fact, upon receiving Hess's letter explaining the action, he apparently screamed so loud that it echoed across his mountaintop vacation home. Something had to be done immediately to reassure the public and signal Italy and Japan that Hitler was not trying to make a separate peace with Britain. And the solution was to portray Hess as mad in the German press, driven insane by World War I wounds, and foolishly falling prey to astrologers and mediums. As part of that, Reinhard Heydrich, a major rival of Hess and anti-occultist, later known as Heinrich the Hangman, unleashed a countrywide operation called Action Hess that arrested hundreds of occultist practitioners, closed their publications, and confiscated thousands of books. This time, it was not just the commercial psychics, but also Ariosophists and Theosophists, those that shared Nazi radical beliefs. Hess's personal astrologer was imprisoned, while some went to concentration camps. They never saw it coming, noted propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels in his diary. Yet this repression was not the end of occult practice in Nazi Germany, because while the Gestapo and security service swept up targets, they found themselves stymied by senior figures who wanted to protect those that practiced, quote, scientific astrology, who had degrees or were performing, quote, important work on dowsing and discovering enemy ships via pendulum. Also, the occult books confiscated were not burned like the others, rather redirected into the library of Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, because they were to be used in a grand project already underway. For in 1935, he had founded the Ahnenerbe, a society for the study of German ancestral heritage, and they had dispatched teams of academics to places as far-flung as Tibet and the Crimea, looking to find and verify the imagined past of supermen that underpinned their racial ideology. attempting to not only prove that the Germans were the world masters, but that in ages past, the newly invaded lands of Eastern Europe had belonged to them. Which means, next episode, we'll be getting into what can only be described as the Indiana Jones stuff. Now, if you are familiar with that series of films, you'll surely remember two things. One, Indy punches just like a bunch of Nazis, and two, he does a lot of traveling. And if, like Dr. Jones, you find yourself traversing the globe today just without that handy travel montage complete with guiding red line, then you understand the benefits of a reliable internet connection while abroad. That was actually something I became painfully aware of last year when I was traveling in Germany. I got a bit lost outside of Lindau and was in desperate need to contact my friends, but because I didn't have the right eSIM, I couldn't make a call or send a text or even use Google Maps. So when Saley, a new eSIM service app, reached out to sponsor an episode, I can really only say I'd wish they'd contacted us sooner. For the uninitiated, an eSIM provides internet connection whenever you're traveling and saves you money on roaming fees. And with Saley, it's never been easier to get service in over 160 countries and 8 regions. It's as easy as downloading their app, choosing which plan is right for your travels, and then applying our code EXTRAHISTORY to get an exclusive 15% off discount. Saley is compatible with iOS and Android phones, has 24/7 customer support, and can be downloaded before you go, so your connection is all set the moment you land wherever. So please don't be like 1 year ago, Matt. Be more like right this very moment, Matt, and scan the QR code here to download the Saley app and use the code EXTRAHISTORY at checkout to save some bank while never having to hunt for public Wi-Fi again. Or you can, click here to get Saley if you want to let your mouse do the talking, and then once you're set to jet, no matter where you are, why not check out our next video here? Oh my god, I'm so glad I caught you. Did you know that Angelo Valenciana, Arclight Games, Dominic Valenciana, Foxdoc, Hunter Z, Joseph Blame, Kuyakoi, and Ziliad Architectures were the best legendary patrons? Well, now you do.